So where we left off is with the knee controls. We got these going back and forth like so. So we can change the direction of the knee because it's an IK setup, which is really nice. Now the next thing we want to do is start creating other controllers. I'm going to start with the clavicle here. I'll go through on how to create this. But what we're going to do is we're going to run through the root control, the spine controls, however many you need, chest control, neck controls, head control, shoulder, elbow, wrist controls. We'll leave the fingers alone for today. And what I've got here is my clavicle that I'm going to be using. But what I did was I just created this using an EP curve. So create curve tools, EP curve, and just going off of this. This is just a way to create your own custom controllers. And I'm holding X to snap to grid. So I'm just going through. Clicking away while holding X. And then hit return when you're done. And now you've got it's a pretty common sort of shape that you can use for it. The one thing about once you get these in here is that you could essentially start to manipulate it so it looks a little bit different. Get a little bit more rounder of a look. Something like so. So you can do some adjustments that way too. And just by simply changing it all together. And then depending on how you need it to look, you can scale it out and do whatever. So that's just a way you could go ahead and create that. This will be for my clavicle. So L clavicle, or L clav is really common. CTR L clav controller W. So I'll start with this one simply because it's the most difficult one to create, and then rotate and rotate. We're snapping it to the joint, and it seems just like far too large at the moment. So again, go ahead and resize. And they do have scripts for this you can download. I don't know. If you can find a decent script that'll work, that's great. But for the most part, you can just sort of get this to look however you want manually. Hold on. So basically, I'm going to switch to my side viewport, and just so it's not like intersecting with the mesh or anything. Okay. I will sort of see what I need with it, and basically just manipulate it however I need it from here. Oops. So what I'm going to do is from back here, drag this part out, drag this part out, okay, something like that, and then I'll just probably scale it a little bit smaller, move it up to get something that will look like this. Just a second. Okay. And I mean, it's pretty good considering. I guess technically something like that. Good enough. Simply, this is a sort of a basic shape for it. Sometimes you'll see, generally it's some type of arrow going around here, whether you're going to move it up and down or just a basic rotate. But just to give you an idea, you can create these controllers however you like, and then you could just manipulate it to wrap around the mesh however you need it to. If I were to be able to give myself a little bit more leeway, you know what, it's fine. For the demo, it's fine. So, here we go. What I have in my other one, I have something similar. So here I've got this for my clavicle, and you see it just works that clav. Similar shape. So you can get it to be any shape you'd like. So here's mine now. L-clav, modify, freeze transformations. You can control duplicate, and in this case, I'm going to, I had worked it so that it wouldn't be intersecting with my mesh too much, so I can hold D and V and re-snap this pivot point directly onto the clav joint, and this way it'll allow me to manipulate it from that pivot point. So again, I can now take this, duplicate, and then snap this over here, and now I've got my clav for both sides, and modify, freeze transformations. Okay, so there are my clavicle controllers. The next thing, I'll delete this one. The next thing I can do is I can create all of my controllers from here on out using a NURB circle for the most part. The only one you might want to vary is the root control. Generally this is in a different sort of custom shape due to it being the main controller that controls everything on animating generally. If you take a look here, this one's just got this simple little star for it, so I could do something like that. Go in here, top view. I'm going to start now from the root controller. This is it doesn't matter what type of shape you really go for. I'm basically just eyeballing this. Here. Something like that. That'll work fine. Modify center pivot. And snap it to your root control. You can move it slightly out however you need it to be. That might be easier to use actually, like so. But that could be my root control. And now I can take this and I'm going to snap it. Make sure I snap this to my root controller because I slightly adjusted it. Holding V, snap to vertex. And rename root CTRL and modify freeze transformations. Okay, so that takes care of that. Now, the next thing I can do is going back here. For the rest of these controllers, I can use a NURB circle basically. We just differentiate a couple here in order to achieve those differentiation, the different look, because it is visually appealing to an animator for certain controls to look different, because if they all look the same, it kind of can get confusing here and there. But we know these are going to be the clavs and this will be the root. The rest are pretty spaced out well enough in order to have them differentiate enough. So I'm going to create NURBS circle, and let's just see here. Okay, so this will be my first spine control. I don't have to follow these if I don't want to, but you can, however many joints you made, if you're not sure. And generally, even though the spine's there, I'd like to center it and then just change my pivot. Okay, so that'll be, spine 1 controller, modify, freeze transformations. You could even call it like waist or something, or I'm just going to call it spine 01 CTRL. Now the next thing I'll do is I'll duplicate this one, snap it here to my next joint. Let's see. Snap it to my next joint, and I'm going to have these grow slightly larger. As I mentioned before, you don't have to have every controller for each part. It's simply just You can, but it's something you might want to think about beforehand. Since this is just going to be an FK setup without any IK spline IK clusters or anything like that, no clusters, no spline IK handles. You get some wobbly movements. This will be just a standard, simple rig. This is optional and depending on how many controllers you want to have. Obviously, the more controllers that you have, the more control you'll have of your rig. So, never a bad idea for that. And these generally just become slightly larger per controller. So I can call this spine 2. And since I have the joints there, I'm just going to do it anyway. Might as well. Spine 3. Modify, freeze transformations. Same here. Okay. Now I'm going to do a chest controller. And this one will be slightly different. I can take this one and duplicate it. And from here, I'm simply going to manipulate these to wrap around the character itself as needed. So I'll have it go under the armpit. And depending on how you want this guy to look, how you want his rig to look, could do something like that. And this one I call chest controller. Modify, freeze transformations. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the shoulder, elbow, and wrist controllers. Because I've got the clav in there already. And if you need to, depending on how your character is, you can always go ahead and readjust these as well. But I'm just going to simply drag mine down to get a little bit more of a centered look around the mesh itself, and then just re-snap the pivot point as necessary here. And I'm going to duplicate this one, scale slightly smaller, and probably rotate here. And before I do that, actually, before I snap it to that joint, I'm going to center my pivot and snap it to the joint and sort of now recenter it to the mesh. That's good. Okay. So, got one more duplicate. Snap down here to the wrist. Make it slightly smaller. And that's pretty good. And I'll freeze transformations on all of these. Okay. And now I've got the, I'll rename these now. L shoulder, CTRL, L clav, L shoulder, L elbow, CTRL, L wrist, CTRL. Now you can just go ahead, duplicate these. If necessary, you can snap them and invert them. This will be R shoulder CTRL. Remember to freeze transformations on everything. Duplicate, snap to the elbow, and remember scale X -1. That should do it. Let's take a look at this one. That one's a little bit better. So what you can do in this case, actually, since it's not doing it right, you can always snap your pivot point to the center of the grid at 0. Command D, scale -1, and now you've got freeze transformations. You've got both controllers. You just have to remember to re-snap it to the elbow. Just the pivot point. Okay. And I'm going to do the same over here. Okay. And now I've got this wrist joint. Command D, scale -1, modify freeze transformations, R wrist CTRL, snap my pivot point to the joint. Okay, same thing here. So I've got everything renamed. Everything should have frozen transformations. So let's just run through the rig setup that we've got here. Got the root control, spine 1 control, spine 2, spine 3, chest control, left shoulder, left elbow, left wrist, left clav, right shoulder, right elbow, and right wrist. Now just do an edit, delete all by type, non-deformer history. Double check that you didn't accidentally hit anything else, and your rig should still work up to this point. And that's creating the upper body controls. A little bit longer, but there's a lot more controls on the upper body here. So that's all I've got for you right now. Next I'll be creating, we'll connect these controllers and get the parenting correct, and next time we'll do create the neck, the head, and finger controls. So that's about it for today.